There's a question that has stayed with me for many years now, a question that honestly has changed me as a mother, and then as an educator, and then as someone who spent the last 3 decades sitting with families in their most ordinary day and yet the most overwhelming moments of their lives. The question is, when did we decide that needing other people was a problem?
I remember when my first son was a few weeks old, and he would be crying in the evenings after he'd been fed and all of his needs were met. At least that's what I thought. I remember voices in my head telling me that maybe I was spoiling him, that crying was maybe a manipulation, but at the same time, he was so tiny and obviously crying for a reason. It was torturous to have these doubts, and I'm sure he was picking up on my anxiety. Something inside me kept mulling over that advice, making me wonder if I was doing it wrong.
That phrase, don't pick up the baby because you'll spoil it, where does that even come from? What does it mean exactly? Spoil him with what? Spoil him with being held, with being loved, knowing that when he cries, someone's going to come to him?
The reason we're starting here is because everything else we talk about builds on this one theme. There's a story we've been told about children, about what they need and what they don't need, what the right amount of closeness looks like. And what that story contains is often based on assumptions and very outdated advice. It's not grounded in sound child development. We can say it is wrong in a way that has consequences. For children, yes.
We laugh when we hear it now, but at the time we were worried because we've been raised in a culture that makes parents afraid of their own love and intuition.
But also for the adults those children become, and for the parents who are exhausted and confused and wondering why it's so hard to trust themselves. Why does it feel so self-contradictory?
Well, we want to tell a different story today. A story that starts with biology, moves through some history, lands in actual research, and ends with something that we hope you'll still be thinking about when you're making dinner tonight.
Let us go back, because this idea of holding a baby too much is dangerous, that responding to crying creates dependence, that the goal of infancy is to get the child functioning independently as possible. These ideas did not fall out of the sky. They've been developed and supported throughout history.
So here's one of many examples. In 1928, a psychologist named John B. Watson published a book called The Psychological Care of Infant and Child. Watson was enormously influential around the world. He was considered one of the founders of behaviorism, and that's the idea that human beings are essentially shaped by their environment, reward and punishment, stimulus and response. And in his book, he gave parents very specific instructions. He wrote, and I want to read this exactly because it's important to hear the actual words. He wrote, "Never hug and kiss them. Never let them sit in your lap. If you must, kiss them once on the forehead when they say goodnight. Shake hands with them in the morning. Shake hands with your children." He believed that affection made parents and children weak, that comfort created dependency, that if you wanted to raise a capable, functional human being, you needed to treat them from the very beginning with harshness and emotional distance.
We now know that Watson's own children suffered from various forms of mental illness and even suicide as a result of their father's philosophy. His granddaughter dedicated her life to informing not only the public, but spoke to doctors at Johns Hopkins University about the consequences of his work. But the ideas were already out there. They had already been passed to parents who passed them to their children, who became parents themselves. The damage was already compounding.
Here's the thing that matters most. Those ideas did not disappear. They became, and still are, common belief in many cultures. They became what we call normal parenting. Don't pick him up. Every time he cries, you'll spoil him. Or she needs to learn to self-soothe. Let him cry it out. He needs to build resilience. Crying is good for the lungs. And we still hear all of these bits of advice. These phrases feel timeless, natural, and true because they've been repeated for nearly 100 years. But they came from one man in 1928 who is clear, didn't know what he was talking about.
We want to be clear. The people who pass these ideas down to us, our parents, our grandparents, The doctors who gave advice, they're not trying to harm anyone. They believed they were helping. They were doing what every generation does, repeating what they had been taught. But the question we have to ask, that every generation has to ask, is this: is it actually true? Does the science back it up now?
The answer is a very clear, very well-documented no. Then we as parents have an opportunity not to punish ourselves for what we didn't know, but to do something different going forward.
Let us talk about what the science says. And we promise this is the part that might feel like a biology class for a few minutes, but stay with us because it changes everything.
Human babies are born at an immature stage of development and need what is called a fourth trimester of development outside the womb. Compared to other mammals, when we arrive with some elements still to be developed. Incidentally, it's the plasticity of the brain that enables us to learn how to adapt to our environment, but we'll look at that later. A baby giraffe stands and walks within hours of being born. A baby elephant is mobile almost immediately. Even a puppy is helpless only for a few weeks, but a human baby is totally dependent for some years to come.
And this is not a design flaw. This is not evolution getting something wrong. This is, and researchers have been clear about this, a direct consequence of the most extraordinary thing about our species, our brains. The human brain is so large and so complex that if we gestated long enough to be born neurologically ready, our heads would not fit through the birth canal. So we're born early and we finish developing outside the womb in relationship.
The first 3 years of life, and especially the first 12 months, are the most intensive period of brain development that a human being will ever experience. The brain is not waiting to receive information. It's building itself based on what it experiences right now in those ordinary, unremarkable, completely irreplaceable moments.
Every time a parent responds to a baby's cry, every time they pick up, hold, soothe, make eye contact, neural connections are forming. The circuits for trust, for emotional regulation, for the ability to feel safe in this world and safe enough to explore it. We're not talking about special activities. We're not talking about educational toys or music classes or particular methods. We're talking about attuned, responsive care, consistent, reliable, warm responses to the needs of this small person.
That's what builds a brain, not independence practice, not learning to wait, not figuring it out alone, but connection, consistent, lived connection.
Here's the part that I want you to really sit with, because this is where the whole myth collapses. We've been told for generations that pushing children towards independence early fosters personal autonomy, that responding less teaches self-reliance, that closeness creates dependency. The research shows the exact opposite, not slightly different, the opposite.
We want to give you an image that has helped us explain this to hundreds of parents. Imagine that you're in an unfamiliar city. You don't know the streets, you can't speak the language very well, you're not sure where you are, and you have two options. The first option, you have a phone with a GPS or even a number of someone that lives in the city. You're certain that if you get lost or you walk down the wrong street or if you end up somewhere you didn't expect, if the GPS goes wild, you know you can call and talk to a person and they'll help you find your way.
In the second option, you have nothing. No phone, no map, no one to call. You're on your own. And whatever happens, you have to handle it alone. Now, in which scenario are you more likely to explore your environment? The first one, right? Because we explore more when we know we have a safety net. We take more risks when we know someone has our back. We go further when we know we can come back. That is what is called the secure base. That is what attachment is.
And let's be clear, the secure base is not about keeping your child close to you forever. It's not about hovering or never letting them struggle. It's about being reliably present, enough that the child's nervous system registers, I'm safe, and because I'm safe, I can go.
John Bowlby, The psychiatrist who developed attachment theory in the 50s and 60s was the one who coined the phrase, the secure base. And the research that has built on his work for 70 years has confirmed it over and over in study after study across multiple cultures.
Mary Ainsworth, Bowlby's colleague, designed an experiment in the 1960s called the strange situation. First, she observed mothers and babies in their homes and how they interacted, and then she brought these mothers and babies into a room with a stranger present and briefly separated them, then reunited them, and she watched carefully what happened. What she found was that the babies who were the most securely attached, the ones whose mothers had been consistently responsive, those babies were the most willing to explore the room, the toys, and then when their mothers were present, they were curious, engaged, adventurous.
And when they were upset by the separation, which they were, and that's completely normal, when reunited with their mothers, they recovered faster. They let themselves be comforted. They went back to exploring. The babies who were insecurely attached, there were different reactions, but often they were clingy before the separation even happened because they'd already learned that you have to hold on tight because presence is not guaranteed.
So the securely attached babies cried less overall, they were easier to comfort, and they were more joyful. They felt safe in the presence of their parents because there was an established bond of trust.
We want to bring this down from the level of research and into a regular afternoon, because that is where parenting actually happens. When your 14-month-old crawls away from you at the playground and then looks back, that look is not random. That is the secure base in action. They are checking, are you still there? And if you are, if you catch their smile, they turn back and go further. You didn't have to say anything or do anything. Your presence is enough.
When your 3-year-old has a meltdown in the middle of the grocery store, you don't send them away to calm down, but you get down on their level and you stay with them. You're not rewarding bad behavior. You're teaching their nervous system what emotional regulation feels like. You're being the GPS in the unfamiliar city. And when your 6-year-old comes home from school and something went wrong and they don't tell you right away, they just need to be near you for a while. That nearness is not regression. It's them returning to base, refueling their emotional tank, getting ready to go back out.
The secure base doesn't stop at infancy. It's not something you graduate from. It's the nature of close relationships across a lifetime. We all return to the people we trust most when things are hard. It's not weakness, but how we humans feel regulated.
Let us be very direct about something because we don't want this conversation to be misunderstood. We're not saying children should never experience frustration. We're not saying that parents should anticipate every need before the child feels it. We're not saying difficulty is bad.
We are saying that the capacity to tolerate difficulty, to regulate strong emotion, to recover from failure, those capacities are built through relationship, not through isolation, not through being left to figure it out alone. Resilience is not the absence of support. Resilience is having been supported enough that you know how to get through hard things.
And the children who grow up to be the most independent, in the real sense, are the ones who are held close when they needed it, who had their distress met with skin touch and warmth instead of distance, who learned over and over that the world is basically safe and that people are basically available. That belief, built in early childhood through thousands of ordinary moments, becomes the internal foundation that a person carries for the rest of their life.
And you know what that foundation makes possible? Risk, adventure, failure without catastrophe, love without fear of abandonment. All the things we actually want for our children, all of them trace back to those moments.
I want to tell you something I have not always felt comfortable saying in public, but I think it matters. When my children were small, I did some things that were right, and I did some things that, knowing what I know now, I would do very differently.
Same. We both have that list.
I remember a night when my son was crying and someone I trusted, someone whose opinion I respected, told me, "Let him cry it out tonight. He needs to learn that crying does not always work." And I lay there in the dark listening to him. Something inside of my body felt so wrong. Not uncomfortable because it's hard, but wrong, like an alarm. I lasted about 20 minutes and then I went to see him, and I remember feeling so guilty about it, like I had failed him, like I was the one who could not handle it, like my softness was a problem.
That feeling, that guilt for responding, is one of the things that drives us most, because you were not failing. You were listening to 30,000 years of evolutionary wisdom that your body carries even when our culture has forgotten it. That alarm in your body, it was your biology and intuition feeling contradicted. That is your nervous system recognizing what your baby's nervous system needs.
Instincts because someone in position of authority told them to, because a method promised results, because the culture said, "This is how it's done," external voices. And we want to say very clearly to anyone who needs to hear it today, it's very important to listen to your own intuition and to do what your body is telling you. There's a lot of wisdom in that, and also science now is on its side.
Before we close, we want to say something to those of you who are watching from Latin America, from Spain, from communities in the United States, where you carry another culture with you.
The way modern Western culture raises children, with early sleep training, with babies in separate rooms, with an aggressive push for rapid independence, this is not the historic norm. Not globally, not across time. In most of the world, for most of human history, babies were carried. They were nursed for years, not months, and they slept with their families. They were rarely left alone to cry.
In our book, we write about a naval psychiatrist named James Clark Maloney, who was sent to Okinawa after World War II. He expected to find a devastated, traumatized population. What he found instead was a community that was remarkably emotionally healthy, in spite of living in caves and practically starving. He decided to find out why.
He spent months trying to understand it, and what he kept coming back to was how the mothers raised their babies. They nursed constantly, not just for nutrition, but for comfort. They did everything while carrying their babies or leaving them with someone close to attend to them. And before anyone could have explained it scientifically, these mothers were doing what we now know attachment research confirms. They were raising their babies with love and respect so that they could feel safe and later become secure adults.
Many Latin American families already practice this. The instinct to keep babies close, to have them be part of the family rather than apart from it, is something the Western world spent 100 years trying to undo and is now spending decades trying to recover. So our message is, trust your intuition no matter where you are in the world.
We want to leave you with something today that we hope will still be turning in your mind for a while, that dependence is not the opposite of independence. It is the foundation.
We will say it again because it sounds simple, and it is, but it's also the thing that contradicts 100 years of bad advice, and it deserves to be heard clearly. Dependence is not the opposite of independence. It is the foundation of it.
And the child who is held, who's responded to, who learns that the world answers when they reach out, that child grows up knowing they can reach out, that it's safe to need things, that closeness is not dangerous. And from that, knowing they can become someone who can stand alone because someone was always there for them. Now, we're not asking you to be perfect parents. We're not asking you to never have a hard night or to never feel overwhelmed or to get right every single time. Parenting is not a performance. It's a relationship, and relationships are built in the ordinary moments, the fun afternoons, the inconvenient midnights, the moments when you're tired, but you go anyway.
What we're asking is simple. The next time someone tells you that you're holding your child too much, or any of these beliefs, just pause for a moment before you believe it. Ask yourself, is it true? Where did that idea come from? Is it backed by anything other than tradition? Because the answer, most of the time, is no. It came from a century of well-meaning but mistaken advice, and you do not have to repeat it.
We're so glad that you are here. We're Barbara Nicholson and Lisa Parker. We co-founded Attachment Parenting International 30 years ago. Our book, Criar con el Corazón, is being published in Spanish for the very first time. Visit our website and find a free audio book featuring the introduction and a summarized version of the first chapter of the book.
Next week, we're going to talk about crying, why it is not and cannot be manipulation, what is actually happening in your baby's brain in those moments, and what the research says about what to do about it. We will see you then.